What's up YouTube? Brian here, back again with another video, and today we are talking about these bad boys, the Deps Cover Scat. Now I know most of you watching my channel has probably heard of these things because you pay attention to a lot of like the Hookup tackle and all the shops that sell Deps. If you guys don't know, Deps is a Japanese bait manufacturer. A lot of their stuff has been getting easier to find in the United States in the last year or two. You know, the distribution has gotten bigger. There's more shops carrying these things. Cover scats for a while were very hard to get. They were flipping on eBay. You could buy these things for 10 bucks a pack, and then people were selling green pumpkin cover scats on eBay for like 30 bucks, and people were buying them because they're kind of hard to get. But now they're not so hard to get. A lot of places are selling them. They're they must have ramped up production because of the popularity. But anyway, this is a review on this bait. I'm not trying to sell people on this bait. I've actually been out and fishing with it this year, so I got some thoughts and opinions on the actual bait. First off, I want to talk a little bit about what the bait is. If you guys don't know, it's the poop bait, right? So it's called a cover scat. It's basically a log. It's a big chunk of plastic. It's got some ribs. The design of the bait is actually really cool because they've really designed it to fit a hook really well. So this is the 3.5 inch cover scat, and a 6/0 hook fits it perfectly. So you want to use a 6/0 EWG hook. Let's talk about the hooks real quick for the 3.5. I found 3 hooks that work really well, and they're basically all the same. I don't think one's really any better than the other. First is the Ryugi Infini 6/0. Works great. The Owner Jungle EWG 6/0, and then there's obviously the Gamakatsu. This is the Monster Worm EWG Monster 6/0. So the point is, you got to get a big hook for a relatively small bait because of the way they designed the bait. So the bait is designed for this specific size hook, and the reason is there's a cavity that you run the hook point down through. Then you're supposed to run it back up through the belly, and then out the top there's a little bump. So if you can see this, there's a little bump, and then you're supposed to put the point of the hook right into the bump, and that essentially makes it weedless. So that's why you have to run a 6/0 hook on this, and so you can get that hook point right into that little bump on the top. So rigging in this thing is really simple. You don't need a weight. These are supposed to be fished weightless. That's part of the design of this. It's a big, chunky, salty plastic. It falls, hits the bottom. It actually has a surprising amount of action for like having not any flappy appendages or paddles. When you pop this thing off the bottom, it darts and it kind of darts up and then kind of slowly falls down and darts up and so falls down. It really, I guess, is supposed to mimic the action of a startled crayfish. So if you ever see crayfish in the water and you hit the water or you try to grab one, they shoot back up. They swim backwards really fast, and then they kind of settle back to the bottom, and they shoot up and they settle back to the bottom. That is what this is mimicking, in my opinion. So it definitely looks like a real piece of forage, especially if you're in a lake where fish feed on crayfish a lot. Like if you're in a crayfish lake, this is probably a good bait to try out. So you rig it completely weedless. You just need a single hook, and then you need the bait. Now let me talk about the cons on this. So I don't think a lot of people are talking about the bad things with the cover scat. So a couple cons. Number one, these are pretty soft. So that little bump that holds the hook point, it doesn't hold it for very long. If you get a bite or you fight a fish, basically that bulb is toast. Like once the hook point pulls out of that thing and rips it, it's not going back in. So that's a con. Is the bump is a cool when you first rig it, but after you fished it and fished one bait for a while, it tears, it doesn't work, and then you just got to drive the hook point into the body if you kind of want it like weedless, right? So that's a con. The other con is the sink on these things is painfully slow. So if you're a power fisherman and you like to fish fast, this is not the bait for you. If you're sitting in like 10 feet of water and you fire this bait out, you better just pull out your phone, check Twitter, check your email, send some text messages, read a book. This thing takes a long time to fall. But once it's on the bottom, then you're ready to go. So you basically cast it out, you sit and wait, you wait. And then once it's on the bottom, you slowly kind of reel it, pop it once in a while, let it sit, reel it a little bit, pop it, let it sit. You have to fish this thing insanely slow. Hopefully you got spot lock. Having spot lock on your boat is going to make a big difference with this particular bait. If you're blowing in the wind and you're trying to manage this is just a chill out, drag it around, really slow presentation. So that's it. So that's a con. So cons, the plastic is soft, tears up pretty easy. 2, you gotta fish it stupid slow. And number 3, I don't know if this bait is really better than other things. Like, is this better than a football jig for dragging on a bottom? I will say there's an argument for why this could be better, because I'm going to talk about in the plus department. We'll get to that. So, but in the cons, it's like, is this really a better option than certain other things? Like a football jig, like a Carolina rig, like a Ned rig, like a shaky head, other things you kind of drag on the bottom slowly. Is this better? So let's talk about the plus column. The plus column is weird. It's unique. Something different, right? No one else is on the lake is probably throwing one of these. So that's a plus. The other plus in the department is this thing does not get hung up. I've dragged this thing purposely on some really nasty rock piles and really jaggy rock piles. Like places I ain't dragging a half ounce or a quarter or 3/4 ounce. Sorry, a half ounce or a 1/4 ounce or 3/8 ounce. Let's just say half to 3/8 to 1/4. I'm not dragging a football jig over this rock pile because it's going to get stuck. This thing don't get stuck because of the fact that you're basically just fishing this. It's really light. It shoots up off the bottom, comes through rocks, amazing. So if you're fishing really jaggy rock piles or stuff that you want to be down on the bottom, but you don't want to get hung up like with a Ned rig, this thing is killer for that. I made some casts with a football jig, got hung up. Same rock pile, I pulled out the cover scat and it got through the rocks perfectly fine and caught some smallmouth. So I will say that its positives is how little this thing gets hung up. You can fish basically one hook all day. You're not going to break off. So positives are it's weird, it's unique, it's different. It's kind of fun to fish because it's something, there's a something about the oddity of it makes it exciting, right? Something to do. We throw the same stuff all the time, busting out a cover scat once in a while. It's kind of fun. So there's a novelty factor. It does get bit. I will say I've lost some fish on this thing. And I think that's partly because when this gets bit, like I'm going to show you guys something. So the hook goes down to about right here. So look at this. So even though there's a cavity, right? When the hook gets pushed down into the cavity, that's still a big chunk of plastic that gets in the way of the fish's mouth. So I hooked into a monster smallmouth out in Wisconsin. I'm talking like 4+ pounds. This thing, I slammed him. He was hooked good. As soon as he came up and jumped and shook his head, this thing went flying out of his mouth. And that made me upset. I was like, really? On a football jig, I would have landed that fish, 100%. Ned rig, I probably landed it. But this thing, I get a little worried about how much hook actually moves out of the way because this thing can't really go side to side when it gets hooked. It's not ripping through this plastic because it's so thick in the middle. So you're expecting this much hook to stay pinned. So if you get that hook point through that fish's mouth, hold on and get him in the boat fast. So I will say my hookup ratio was a little questionable on this thing once you do get a bite. Getting a bite is kind of cool because they tend to suck it in and then you kind of feel a little tension on the line and you got to reel down and just kind of crack them because you want to get that hook point through their mouth. So absolutely does get bit. Smallmouth definitely eat this thing. I had a lot of fun fishing smallmouth. Largemouth eat this thing. Fishing along grass lines, edges of grass. Not a great bait to go through the grass. It grabs a lot of stuff around like this point right here in the hook. Like grass wraps around it. It's not the greatest grass bait. It's not like you're flipping it and coming through cover. I'd say it's more for like open water around the edges, around docks. You can fire this thing and kind of skip it and like let it float down on docks, that kind of stuff. So it's not the most versatile bait in the world, but if you're an open water fisherman and you're fishing a lot of rock piles, great rock pile bait. So anyway, I'd say on a scale of 1 to 10, I give this thing probably like a 6, 7, maybe. It's not a world game-changing bait. I know they fish the crap out of this thing in Japan. Probably does really great there. I'm just saying, is it like something that's going to be a staple in my rotation? Probably not. I'd rather fish a football jig or a swim. There's a lot of other stuff I'd probably rather fish than this. But it is cool. It does work. The other problem is price. These are like $10 a pack, and you get 6 in a pack. And they are soft, and they will tear up. So you're gonna go through these. If you have a day where you're actually getting some bites and you're rolling around rock piles and you're going through some fish, like some pike are hitting it and blah blah blah. Like you're gonna rip through a pack of these fairly quick. They're not really like long lasting. They're really dense, but the hook and especially at the head where the hook where your hook comes out the top, this is the part that gets shredded and torn up, right? Like that part gets torn up. The body doesn't get torn up, it's the head. So anyway, this is like just kind of a realistic review of the cover scat. It's definitely fun. It definitely gets bit. Fish do eat it. Kind of expensive. Hookup ratios are a little questionable with the amount of gap you actually get when the bait's compressed and comes through. The bait just doesn't get out of the way of the hook, which, I don't know how you could with this design, honestly, because you got this such dense plastic. The hook, it's not going to tear off or break out of the way. It's just got to move down, and hopefully that fish stays pinned. But anyway, I'm getting a little repetitive, but that's my overall review of the cover scat. If you're into this kind of stuff, you want to try it out, it definitely works. You're not wasting your money getting one of these. It's not like a gimmick bait. It absolutely gets bit. It mimics crayfish. Good on rocks, good in open water. You have to be the kind of fisherman that fishes it super slow. Also, rod, you want to use a medium heavy, preferably longer, because you really want to throw this thing out and work. Because once you're down on the bottom, you don't want your cast to end, because then you got to recast it and wait for it to sink again. So you want to make real long bomb casts with this thing. So I would say a 7 foot to like 7.6 medium heavy kind of rod, like a dragging jig rod. I use the NRX 873 Carolina rig rod on this. Steve's bottom contact 2 would also be really great. A longer rod where you can this thing casts really well. Like you can fire this thing out because it's pretty dense and heavy and it's kind of shaped like a bullet, right? Or, shaped like other things. But like when you fire this thing out, it casts, a really long, it's surprisingly long distance for being weightless. You can fire this thing out. But you want to use a longer rod, kind of a jig rod, something a little longer that you can really make a whippy long cast, let it sit to the bottom, and then work it back really slowly. Making lots of casts with this thing is not really effective because of how long it takes to sink. So anyway, that is my overall review and thoughts and opinions on the Deps Cover Scat. Am I going to buy more? I have so many packs of these things because I've gotten them in the Hookup Tackles bento box, and I've grabbed them here and there. Omnia has them, that kind of thing. So I have enough to last me probably a while. I'm not going to buy more. It is a fun bait though. It has its place. I hope some of this information helps if you're thinking about buying these, or you've bought them and you don't really know what to do with them. I'd say find some rocks, drag them on the rocks, and you'll get bit. I mean, fish do definitely eat these things. So that's my review. If you have any thoughts and opinions I didn't cover about the cover scat, please leave them in the comments on the video. If you've made it this far in the video, please hit like and subscribe. And as usual, always follow me on the old Instagrams. I post a lot of my on the water content, a lot more stuff on Instagram than I do on YouTube. So I put a lot of effort into that. So definitely follow me on Instagram. Appreciate you guys watching, and until the next one, see you later.